Hello everyone, my name is Martin Meyer. I'm a creative specialist with the Foundry, and today I would like to discuss with you ways, tools that you can utilize to quickly fill up your scenes with a vast number of objects and scatter them around. And you can use these techniques in your VFX work. So as a VFX supervisor, I was really constantly tasked with distributing objects on vast areas, whether it was creating forests, cities, distributing rocks, making grass fields, filling up areas with cars, you name it. So Modo has a great tool set that can help you achieve this quickly, effectively, and it can be a lot of fun. This workflow was greatly improved with the arrival of Modo 701. So today we would like to actually compare 601 and 701 and also really focus on the techniques and tools that you can utilize to create a forest scene. So without further ado, let's have a look at the final output of this, or the actually preview render of this. So here I have the scene rendered by using or captured by using the render preview, and render preview allows you to render animation where you can specify amount of time that Modo should spend rendering these frames, and then it will give you an animation that you can use to evaluate the final look before you actually commit to the high quality render. But we'll discuss this in a further detail a little bit later. So let's explore the scene, or the beginnings of the scene right here. Here I have a few models that are coming into the scene, and that is namely the terrain itself, and then the bridge that spells out Modo. If I select the terrain, you can see that the wireframe is fairly low res, and that is due to the fact that I'm actually using Pixar subdivision surfaces, and I have this cage, I have a multi-resolution option on. If I click on the cage, you'll see this is the raw polygons that are making up the terrain, and if I turn it back on, I'll see that there is quite a lot more detail that is sculpted in to the terrain that the forest will live on top of. So you can use this paint tab to quickly jump to the paint layout in Modo, or you can utilize a layout switcher, but I'm actually a fan of the tabs. So this layout is specifically designed to perform all your brush based or brush related tasks. So you have your sculpting tools on your left side, so there are the paint tools and particle tools. On the bottom you have quite a selection of brushes that can be used with your sculpting to enhance the detail. But when I'm just adding some bumps and hills on top of the terrain, I tend to stay in the model section just by selecting the terrain in the item mode. Can switch to polygon selection, and then if I press F3, Modo will give me Modo will bring up the actual sculpting tools anywhere where you are currently in any layout, and you can use them. So just by dragging around, now the video capture is slowing things down a bit, but here I can sculpt actually quite comfortably, adding additional detail to the surface very quickly. So I'm at level 5. This surface has 500,000 polygons, and it performs quite well. So this is how I sculpted up the terrain itself. You can even bake displacement maps into multi-resolution, which is a quite nice workflow. In that case you can use, for example, DEM maps, or any kind of texture that was generated in let's say some terrain generation application, but for the ease of use I really quickly just went ahead and sculpted up this little valley area. Another part of this setup that I would like to show you is the creation of this bridge here. So if I go to my item mode and select the bridge itself, you'll see this is a fairly complex shape. I wanted to be fairly specific, so I actually made a quick drawing of the Modo word and brought it over to Modo, and then I used the pen tool to quickly draw out the shape itself. But the interesting part was the UVing here, because as you can see, this is a fairly complex shape, and I'm actually having a road that nicely tiles across the whole surface, and it wraps around and it just travels on top of the bridge. So for that I actually needed to unwrap this in a way that would go from 0 to 1 in the UV space and nicely sort of travel across the model. So let's select this and let's quickly create a new map, because in Modo this is an extremely straightforward process, very simple. And let's jump to the UV tab, and I will do this on only one side or only one part of the road. So under the lists I can find my UV maps. This UV layout is specifically designed to help you with your UVing tasks. Here I have my UV view, 3D viewport, and then the lists. So if I select the road, these are the UVs for the road itself. And I also created few selection sets that allowed me to quickly select various pieces of the bridge. If I select the top road, it will select all the polygons related to the paved surface. And if I now press left bracket, Modo will invert the selection, and I can hide it by pressing H. If I double click this, if I select these two polygons and press L, Modo will select that edge loop, and I can hide this as well, because I really want to unwrap only one portion of the road for now. To really show you how easy it is and how quickly you can unwrap these surfaces, we'll create a new map, call it new, cryptically. Here we go, and it's unwrapped, and then I can use this absolutely fantastic UV peeler tool to quickly unwrap complex tubular surfaces like this. So just by clicking in a viewport, either in a 3D or 2D viewport, I will get a nice unwrap of the road itself. So this actually distributes the UVs evenly, and the only issue there is the fact that the edges are a little jagged. So I can go to vertex mode by pressing 1, select the edge right here, and then flatten it by pressing these buttons. Handy stuff. So just fix this all. The reason why nothing is changing in the viewport is the fact that the texture itself is not using this newly created UV map. So if I select the image that is receiving the UV map and go to its texture locator, I can change which texture map it's currently using. So if I choose new, you'll see that this will actually wrap in a very bad way, and that's the reason for that is that I'm actually wrapping the texture 300 times across the horizontal and then only 1 time across the vertical. So that means that this particular UV island is actually rotated. The modeling and UVing tools are in Modo are generic, so the same tools that I'm using to transform my geometry, say the move tool, I can use to modify the UV, work with the UV space. So just by double clicking either in the 3D viewport or in the UV space, you can just select these polygons, and I need to rotate them by 90 degrees like so. If I want to be specific, I can just say 90. And as you can see, this is already a better result. I do have the road, but I also have a little bit of the grass on the sides. So I can shrink this down a little bit, and this will give me a great mapped road. From here, it's really just a matter of adjusting the number of repetitions on the tile texture, so you can get road that will really look the way you actually intend it to look. And so as you can see, this was really 2-click process, unwrapping this really complex shape and getting a great result right off the bat. So this is really as far as the model creation goes. The next thing that I would like to discuss is actually bringing in the geometry into the scene and creating the beginnings of the forest creation. Let's jump back to new again. explore the scene a little bit. We have various tree species coming in. They were actually they are using the Xfrog library that you can purchase from Luxology's website. Great tree species, really high-res, nice details. You can actually go down to the individual pines or needles on these pine trees. Then I'm using a car model that is coming from the standard content library that ships with Modo. Another great set of assets to have. And so we'll need to bring in various tree species into the scene and the cars. Let's discuss this in a further detail here. Okay, so here we go. This is the second section of the setup, and the trees and the cars were brought in by using a Modo's asset management system. It's a really cool way to distribute or really quickly fill up your scenes with objects. So if I go to Layout tab, this tab is actually best suited to bring in your models. You can of course load them in, but if you're using the asset management system, models will come in nicely packed. Also, you get the benefit of drag and drop actions, so I can just drag the car in and it will nicely place itself wherever it was dragged in. And if I go to bring in my meshes or my trees, I can go to models here, nature. This is not a standard structure that the Xfrog is being shipped with. This is just something I'm using for the demo material. So under the trees, I can start bringing in my pine trees, or I can of course drag and drop them and they will pop in the scene wherever they're supposed to land, where you would expect them to land. So I will open up a scene that I prepared before with the initial setup of the forest. Let's give a Modo a little moment to process this, and let's zoom out a little bit, and I will go to the setup tab that is again best suited for any kind of connecting of your objects. Let's turn this off quickly and zoom out. So to start building the forest, we'll need a couple of items. Those are the ingredients that you can building blocks of any kind of replicator system. So let's just remove these things from the viewport, so we can, from the schematic view, so I can start creating them as I go. So our first input will be the terrain on which the trees should grow, or any kind of replicator should grow. That needs to be either a point cloud or a surface such as the terrain. So let's bring that guy in right here. And another building block that we'll need is a particle system, or point cloud to be more precise. So in this case, I'm going to use a point cloud surface particle generator that uses surfaces to scatter particles across. So let's bring this one into schematic. And you can also use its sort of a counterpart or equivalent within the shading context under the special surface generator. This has the benefit of being able to control this with the textures, but since I really want to just spread the particles across the whole area and fill up this whole terrain with a forest, this one will work perfectly fine. So it expects one input, surface, a source surface, and optionally it can also limit its influence or the area on which the particles will live to the specific material. So now we can do it nicely and visually without going through the drop downs. I can just connect these two together. What you'll notice is that the particles do clamp in a confined space. They are all on top of each other, and the reason for that is that these are actually being spaced too close to each other. So now I know that a number that worked for this particular setup was around 1 meter. And as you can see, now they are distributed nicely across the whole area. One thing to note is that they do obey the subdivision surface. So they are, even though this is sculpted and most of the detail is in the multi-resolution data, it's the deformation of the surface is all sculpted up. The particles do adhere to that deformation. Great stuff. Cool. So they are nicely distributed, but as you can see, I'm still getting some clumps, or in some areas they are quite packed. If you look at the setup, there is this nice setting that allows you to minimize the number of overlaps, so the trees are not growing on top of each other. So I know that roughly 2 meters works for this setup. Now I'm getting much better, more even distribution of the particles on the surface. Great. So we have particles, we have a point cloud. For Replicator, it can be really either hand created vertices or any kind of particles. Now I need the actual item that is responsible for connecting the trees that I brought in before. Right here, they are the tree source. Here I have my three items. I will bring them into the scene, like so, because we'll use them a little later. Now I need actually the item responsible for the connection between the particles and the three items. And that is my favorite Replicator tool or item. Let's just create that and drop it into the scene right here. Great. So the Replicator expects two inputs. That is the point source, whether it's particles or vertices or polygons. And then actually the prototype. Now prototype is the item that is going to be scattered across the surface. Let's connect the generator to particle source, and as you can see, nothing has happened because there are no prototypes to scatter across the land. Before we connect this, I would like to make sure that Modo, or we won't overload the OpenGL display, and so if you press O, because Modo can display all the replicas in a viewport, and it can do that even on a fairly low-end gamer card, but that slows down, of course, the setup time. So if I press O, I want to make sure that my replicators are set to none or selected. And if you do want to see certain types of replicas, but not all, you can always go to a replicator itself, and under Display tab, I can choose a bounding box as my display tab. This will make sure that for this particular replicator item, the instances or the replicas won't be displayed in OpenGL viewport. Cool. So now what I would like to do is actually, now knowing that I won't crash this, I can connect my prototypes right into the system. Now this is a great visual way of connecting things. Previously in Modo 601 this wasn't really possible. You had to create a select item group and then connect that one to your replicator, and then Modo would randomly scatter the objects. Now this is much more procedural way of connecting things. You can really see what's coming in, what's going out, and I just find it much more straightforward and easier to understand. Great, so we have now particles across the surface everywhere, and it can become fairly difficult to see what's going on with all these bounding boxes displayed. In Modo 601 you had most of the controls available to only inside of the replicator item itself. You could randomize the scale, for example, like so. You'll see that the trees are now randomly being scattered. But the tools that I like to use when I'm dealing with a lot of data here, under the instancing, you can actually decrease the display density for that system. That's one way to accomplish it. And of course you can increase the average spacing in general, but that will reduce the actual number of rendered particles. So there is really no procedural way to control how many replicas will be displayed and so on. So this really at least to me, the additions of 701 tools really make a lot of difference. In particular, the particle modifiers that you can use to start working with your replicator systems. Let's introduce a first particle modifier into this, and to demonstrate in which way they work, I'll just create a simple, the most simple particle modifier, and that is an item cryptically named particle modifier. So let's bring it into the schematic. Sorry, it already dropped into the scene. So, and now I will actually pass the data from the terrain through the particle generator to particle source, and if I connect these two guys between, you'll see there was a little shift, but now I'm actually getting a certain level of control over the particles by modifying the data on the actual modifier. So if I start scaling the particles, you'll see that I can scale only, I can actually modify the size of the particles procedurally. The nice thing is that you can actually limit the influence of this operation with a fall-offs, but we'll get to that hopefully a little later. So you can really just say that this modifier will affect only certain particles within a certain area. Well, the more interesting modifier is, for example, the random modifier. So let's just drag this one in. That allows you to randomize values on the particle data. So let's connect this guy in between here. And now I can actually randomize, oops, not animate, let's randomize the scale. So now you can see that I'm actually scaling these guys randomly. And you can, of course, randomize the rotation. So let's do something that, so it twists randomly across the axis, and then maybe 5 degrees in each. And I'm getting much more natural looking forest. Sometimes it can be fairly difficult to evaluate what you're actually seeing in the viewport without seeing the individual replicas. Of course, you can always go to the render preview. That is in general fast enough to show you the results. So as you can see, I'm getting area filled up with trees, and if I go up, see, I'm already getting the beginnings of the forest, but this can always sometimes be quite slow. So Modo can help you even with this evaluation, or with the, you will be able to see what you're really getting on fly by enabling this Radial option. This is a combination of OpenGL and rendered image in the background. There are two settings, the full and the fast. The fast was introduced with 701. Full was it's a great way to actually evaluate the shading, but as you can see, there is always a processing time, because it essentially takes the render settings and then uses those to show you your setup. But if I change this to fast, Modo will really stop rendering all the textures, all the advanced effects, and with this you can really get, just go to perspective, you'll get very fast feedback, but it's enough to really see what is the distribution, how many trees you're getting, where they are, how they look. And this is really quite a lot of geometry. If I really zoom in on this, you'll see that these guys, and just give it a second, I'm actually rendering nearly all the pines. These are texture strips, but there is a lot of geo that's being processed on fly, and I'm still getting really interactive feedback. So this is a great way to be able to work on your heavy instance scenes in an interactive way. Cool. So we discussed few particle modifiers, but the one that is actually particularly useful for forest creation or ecosystem creation would be the Seeif modifier that allows you to sieve the particles based on certain parameters. If I bring this guy in and pass the particle source to the let the data being processed by the Seeif modifier, this actually now removes certain replicas and disconnects them from the particle system. And it's doing it based on particle ID. So this is a simple condition statement. So if the particle ID is less than 0.5, the replica will disappear. So to increase the number, you can remove nearly all of them or all of them. If you increase the number, you'll be removing less and less. So again, great way to control the density of the system in a procedural way. But the one that I like a lot here is the slope setting. It's expressed in degrees, and I can now use the underlying terrain and its slope to modulate where the trees will be actually growing. So this one is actually used throughout the whole particle system, that in the advanced section. As you can see, this gives the trees quite a nice natural distribution overall. So this covers essentially the basic system and the replicators. Now I will move on to the advanced tree system that employs multiple replicators mixed together, and that allow me to create really nice looking natural forest very quickly. So let's move on to that setup. Okay, so now let's have a look at the advanced version of the ecosystem that I prepared here in advance, and we can just explore the individual pieces. So to really see how this was built, I'm going to disable a few of these replicators and explore them one by one. So I want to first look at the base system. So let's just go to my replicators group and turn the undergrowth and the high altitude pines. So here are the actual trees that are making up the base forest. I'm using 3 different species of plants to mix it up. And let's start right from the beginning. So the terrain, as previously, is coming in to serve as the base for the particles to scatter. And then I have a surface particle generator. These math nodes are doing nothing else but holding the values for ease of use. So I can just keep changing these 2 guys. And this one is being connected to the minimum spacing, and this one is going to affecting the average spacing. So giving me 1 and 2 meters as a result right here. So on top of that, I'm actually randomizing the rotation of the particles a bit, and also the position on y-axis. And this is where things quite differ from the previous possible setups. Now I'm actually feeding this data, this section of the data, to 3 different replicator systems. Right now we are looking at this branch here. So I'm using the Seeif modifier to that's reading the slope of the surface to actually shave off or remove a certain number of particles. So if I say this to 10, you'll see that will kill some replicas, giving me this type of result. So let's quickly jump to Radial fast to see the look that I'm getting here. So you can see that gives me few blank areas, and overall it's actually achieving much more natural look. So this base forest really grows only on areas that are actually where the angle is actually higher than 10 degrees right here. And I can now mix in another type of forest into the setup. For example, if I would like in these areas to have a different kinds of trees that are taller than the rest of the general forest, I can utilize the value or the slope on another particle system. Another modifier in chain is another Seeif modifier that is really just giving me control over the distribution. So if I would like thinner forest, I can just decrease this. Let's give Modo a chance to process this data. Let's say 0.1 to really see this. So reducing the overlap and giving me much thinner version of the forest. So this would be nice, maybe for example a snowy mountain or similar setup. I'm gonna keep it at 0.6 as it was set previously, and to explore another portion of the forest is I will turn this base off and turn on the high altitude. So this one is actually set to be the exact reverse, or close to the exact reverse of my base forest. These are the trees that are growing on top of the mountains, and they're larger, and I'm really using only one species for this ecosystem. Let's just look at the bounding boxes here. And this distribution is actually achieved by reading the initial slope value and I'm adding to that 2, giving me overall result of 12 for the slope. If I scroll down, you can see the resulting value right here. That is causing this particle Seeif modifier to kill off only the particles that are, well, that allows me to mix the two replicator systems or particle systems in one forest, so they are tapering off into the base as well a little bit. Then I'm actually procedurally grabbing those replicas and scaling them up to, let's say, 1.6 or 160%, but you can really choose any number that you would like. Let's jump to fast again. You will see the effect of that number, of changing that number right here, and you can shrink them down, really giving you the total artistic control over the final result procedurally, which is very nice. Now if I enable the base forest again, you'll see that together they are forming a nice thick growth. And if you feel like the pines on top of the hills are a little too thin or a little too small, I can increase this to maybe 2. And now we'll get a nice distinct areas of higher trees, and that are making very nice shadowing effects. And there is very little overlap. You get the sense of individual trees growing in there. The last tree or the replicator that is mixing into this whole setup is the undergrowth. So to really get to see it, I will turn off the other guys and just turn the undergrowth on. Modo will process the data and will give me the results. So these are the little bushes that are growing below or under the main pine trees, filling up the blanks and also mixing in additional colors into the overall look. This one is directly connected to the random modifier. So I'm really creating the particles based on the terrain, then I'm randomly rotating them, and from there I'm actually processing the data further and feeding that into 3 distinct particle system or replicator systems, and all together, if I turn them on, they do form quite nice forest. So just have a look at the way this looks all together. So I'll jump to the preview, let Modo load this all up, and there you go. So a lovely thing about the preview is that I can just draw on top of it, and that will give me very nice, it will reveal the areas that I'm actually hovering above with my mouse. nicely showing me the areas that I could be, you know, the most interested in. So the forest is pretty much ready, and the next thing that was actually used in the animation was another replicator system that was generating these cars right here. So let's explore that in a bit. Okay, so here I have the scene, including the cars open, and if I scrap to the beginning of the animation, you will be able to see the cars distributed on the bridge. Car system is right here. If I zoom at it, let's have a look at the way this part was constructed. So if I go to the main difference here is that to actually create a surface for the cars to be distributed on, I took the road, I just took a few polygons from the actual bridge itself. I'll just select that. Let's hide the car system to make it really visible, and go to my polygon selection, and I selected these two road strips like so by pressing L, and then I copied them into their own new mesh item. This copy was used as, if I enable the car system, was used as the source for the cars on top of the road. So now let's go back to the setup and explore the actual car distribution. I will look through. Let's give Modo a chance to recover because my Radial was on, but yeah, you know, probably a better way or better visual way to see all this would be to stay inside of the render preview where I added the schematic view. So to make this operation faster, I will disable the trees and enable the bridge again. And now we can start exploring the cars a little bit. So this is my mesh. This is the mesh that I was showing you a second ago. This is the duplicate of the road. And now I have two surface generators that are generating the cars for the left side of the road and right side of the road. They're using the very same numbers, very same settings for the distribution. And then I'm processing these with particle modifiers. I'm rotating these cars by 30 degrees to better align them with the road. And then I'm using on the left side, I'm actually using another particle modifier to flip the cars by 180 degrees. So this lane actually travels in the opposite direction. Without this, if I disable this and set it to 0, as though the modifier wasn't there at all the cars are traveling in the same direction. By flipping them, you'll see I'm getting something you would be expected to see on a highway. One thing I forgot to mention is that on each of these generators, I'm actually using the material tag to limit the distribution of the particles to only one side of the road. So there is one source mesh, and now if I just go to the model tab again, you can very quickly create this setup by just double-clicking part of the road, pressing M and giving it the proper material tag, left for example, and then you can use this tag in your setup. So this one is using the road left and this one is using the road right. So each surface generator scatters the particles only across a certain area. The other difference that is comparatively to the three parts is that I'm actually using a group to scatter the car. The group was created by selecting the mesh, the car mesh, right here, the hybrid, and then I went to Groups tab and created a new item group, like so. I was anticipating that I will be using car with multiple parts, which eventually was not the case, but this is another way you can scatter different types of objects or groups of objects. If you add them to a group, then you can just say on the replicator include child items, and all the child items essentially will be scattered together with your group. Okay, so everything looks good, except we have quite a few blue cars, and I have also quite a few shaders associated with the car. So if I open up the master car group, you'll see that every single material is exposed here. And it will be quite difficult to actually find the one that is associated with the hull of the car. So Modo helps here quite a bit. If you just click on any item in your viewport, all you have to do is just click. Modo will take you to the material that's related to, as you can see, it's jumping in the shader tree, changing the selection. Modo will select the item or the material that's affecting a given object. You can also right-click on your viewport on the render preview and choose directly an item that you would like to use inside of the main inside of the tree. So let's just go to the cars. I will delete this gradient since we do not need it anymore, and start actually shading the cars individually. The very same technique was used to randomize the color on the trees. So each tree is slightly different, but I picked the cars as a good example of this technique because the visual difference between individual cars is quite obvious. So I will create a new gradient here, like so. And that turned all the cars green because the gradient is using as input an incidence, and also it's all white. So I would like to actually use the, I would like to sample the particle ID, so each particle will receive different color, and if I open up this graph editor, I can start generating different colors for the cars. So now we'll get a combination of pink cars and white cars and anything in between. It looks quite lovely. So now if I select, let's say, create another color into the mix, I'm getting a gradient between all the involved colors. If you do not want gradients, of course, you can change the tangent or tendency of the curves to stepped, and now I will be really getting only colors that are using a specified colors, and by adjusting these sliders you're controlling the ratios of the cars displayed. Now, one thing that I truly love about Modo is that nearly everything can be saved out as preset. So I did prepare a preset, save out a preset for this gradient. If I just want to load, open up the preset browser palette, and here I have cars gradient. If I load this in, this will jump in, and now this is actually the colors that I'm using for the final render right here. It was that easy. Just save it out, load it in, you can share it on your network, you can then distribute it to your colleagues, or just if you find something that you like, you can use it in different projects this way. Okay, so this covers all the replicator systems that are used throughout the scene. Now I'd like to have a look at the rendering options that you have with Modo, and you can use to output this and generally talk about the output of this scene. Okay, so now I have the scene, the final scene loaded in a Modo, and all the systems are in, all the ecosystems are already plugged in. We have lovely trees, we have our cars on top of the road, And now it's time to actually render it out. So before we do that, I'd like to make sure that the application is actually set up properly, even though it was before, but just take you through a few settings that really influence the way Modo renders out images. So since I'm planning on rendering this picture, this animation as a linear animation or in a linear color space to really aid the compositing process, I would like to go to my system preferences, and under the final rendering section, I'd like to change a few settings. So first of all, I'd like to make sure that my default output gamma is set to 1. Then we'll make sure that every newly created output channel, right here, these are the guys, will be created with the output gamma of 1. This can be changed later, but it's just the convenience thing, really. And another thing is that this independent display gamma, I tend to keep it on because that actually is showing me the preview already gamma corrected. So if I disable this, you'll see that the picture will immediately becomes darker. And this is the way it will be actually outputted, but this is not the way it's going to be processed in compositing. So by keeping this on, I will be actually able to see the properly gamma pictures for my monitor. Pardon me. Cool. So another thing to check would be the actual output gamma on these images. And then since I'm rendering this with Modo's daylight system or sunlight system, I would like to make sure that the whole, every item involving the lighting is actually unclamped. So giving me the proper light intensities throughout the scene, and the bounces will behave in a much more physically correct way. So I can go to the light. If you look at my sunlight, it's usually this physical sun checkbox is checked, and so then you can use these settings to actually adjust the position and time of the day. But the most important setting in this case is this clamp intensity setting. So if I set this to none, the sun will actually emit proper amounts of light into the scene. The same applies for my environmental shader. Or environment shader. Right here it is set to be physically based daylight, and I'm not clamping the sky intensity. The reason why I'm doing this is that then with these settings I can actually use the input white level on the final color or on the color output, beauty output, to control my exposure in a way. So if I set this to default, which is 1, you'll see that the image will be quite overburnt, but that is expected. Then I can essentially increase the f-stop, sort of, to control how much light will be propagated through the picture. So if you want brighter images, you can change it on fly. The nice thing is that this can be changed also after the fact of rendering in the render window settings. Great, so now we are ready to actually start setting up the render. While you're doing this though, you'll find yourself jumping between previous settings and the final settings quite often, at least I do. So this is now set up to be a preview quality render. So anti-aliasing, I just changed it to 1, and the global illumination has practically no rays. The great thing about Modo is that really everything can be saved out as presets. So I can save out this setting on the render item as a preset, let's call it test, and override the one that's in there, and then I will change this to something that could be considered more of a production quality. Let's go to the samples, increase those, and I will save this out as well, right here as a final. So now as I'm working with this and changing things around and adjusting colors, adjusting positions, and maybe changing the animation, I can at any point go back to my presets, and to make it really visual, I can quickly switch between them, and everything that you changed between those two will be also changed, as you can see very quickly. Another great feature of the preview that allows you to quickly iterate and send your outputs for approval is the ability to render animation within specified amount of time. So under the options, I can just go to render animation and then choose, let's say 1 hour. In 1 hour I would like to have a output ready for, you know, either my personal evaluation, or you can send it to your supervisor, or simply get a visual feedback of what you're actually doing. This preview animation that I was using in Nuke was rendered in under 2 hours. And as you can see, it's giving a pretty good idea of how the final look will, what will be the final look, how far, whether everything is working, if the placement is right, if the density of the forest is right, and so on. So you can really visually evaluate your scenes using this lovely feature. On top of that, though, if you're rendering high-res images, and let's say you want to keep your machine render for night, you can use this load progressive and save progressive render options. This will save out the state of the render at any point, and you can resume it back at any point if you choose so. Great, so now we've covered a few output options. Now let's talk about the passes or channels, because that is one of the greatest, or the creation of the channels in Modo is extremely straightforward and quite powerful. So here I have my final color output that is outputting the beauty, and alpha output that will be currently white, since I'm not seeing any background at all. Let's jump back to the shading, and let's say you would like to create a new ambient occlusion output for this. The easiest way I find is just right-clicking on the channel itself and duplicating it. You can of course go to the add layer option, scroll down to special and create render output. I just find this to be just a little bit faster. And then after this is done, all you have to do is just choose the proper type of the channel. Now if I go to my ambient occlusion output, you'll see I'm getting a lovely ambient occlusion, and you can adjust the spread, the quality of it, and so on. The ambient occlusion is a lovely pass to have. It renders quite fast in Modo. You can add many different colors, different render outputs. So let's just duplicate this, and maybe let's create a depth that we can be using in the comp. If I jump to the depth output, I can adjust the maximum depth till I'm getting the right amount of depth information for the scene. As you can see, with the help of preview, you can be quite accurate with this setup as well. Now, in compositing, we are using masks quite often, and in many cases you would like to essentially generate mats for individual objects in your scene. That can be achieved in Modo also quite effectively. Let's just go to the shading, and all you really have to do is pick a shader. I mean, that would be one way to create the masks. Pick a shader. So for example, I would like a masks for all these red metallic objects. So let's just select the bridge, open up the red metal, and if I duplicate my alpha right here, I can drag it into the bridge itself, and let's say call this bridge mat. Great, so now if I just look at that output of this mat, you'll see that I'm getting, provided that I drop it into the right section, now it's giving me actually the mask for the bridge itself, excluding all the trees and the cars. If I move it to the actual red metal section, then I'll be getting only the mask for the red objects in the scene. And the same can be applied throughout the whole setup. Now the car itself is using quite a few materials, as you can see. So this approach wouldn't be all that usable. Here you can actually start organizing your scene slightly differently. If I create a new group, just an empty group for organization purposes, drag it out, and I will pause the preview for now because it's trying to keep up with me, and this is a quite predictable operation. So here I can just call this, let's say, mats. It's an empty group that will hold all my mat layers, and I can, under the group, choose on the item on the group I can choose which group it will be essentially talking to. Now if I chose the car, which is this group, and duplicate the alpha into that, let's call this cars, mat, then as I expected I will be getting mat only for cars, regardless of how many materials the cars actually are using for their shading. So a great way to quickly create masks for anything, because in Modo you can be addressing the objects on multiple levels, whether it's a material selection sets, groups, individual items. It all can be utilized to focus your mask on a specific area. Great, so now let's just hit the render and have a look at the scene. One thing I would like to show you here is that if I press F9 or go to render, that actually paused my recording, so I will do it manually here. I'll open up the render window and then hit the render. Let's start rendering. So Modo will just load all the geometry in and start processing the scene. And as you can see towards the end, right here, I'm actually seeing 7 billion polygons in the viewport. The sampling is fairly low, the GI is fairly low, but I really just wanted to make a point out of the complexity of the scene, like how much it can generate and how much it can process with the global illumination and everything. So to finish it off, I actually made a 4K render of this setup that took roughly 2 hours to render out, and here is the output of that. It's coming in to Modo as linear. If I change this to as RGB, it will become darker, and with a little bit of color correction, this is the result I'm getting. As you can see, it's a nice quick setup. So here you have it. This is really a way I would, or one of the possible ways you could really approach creating forests in Modo. It really can be a lot of fun, and Modo has excellent tools to help you accomplish this. And really any kind of scattering can be these techniques can be used for any kind of scattering. So hopefully you enjoyed it, and have fun with Modo. Now I will spend some time answering the questions. Okay, so now I'd like to take some time to answer the few questions that popped up in the Q&A box. So let's go to the first one, and that is, let's just scroll down a little bit. Can you change the distribution based on height? Yes, you can. If you use the texture-based surface generator, you can influence it by textures, and if you just map a gradient on the y-axis, that will give you effectively the height of the terrain, and then you can use that to influence the density of the particles, and that will work quite nicely. Another question, changing the distribution based on height, that is something I'd like to see, but also on the slope of the terrain. You can mix and match all these things together, so they will work together quite nicely too. And another question is that the speed of the renderer preview is so crazy. Is the machine he's using? I wonder about the specification of his computer. It is a stock MacBook Pro with 16 gigs of RAM, 4 cores, 8 threads. It is a powerful machine, but nothing really special. It is a notebook, really. So especially when you start playing with the render settings of your preview. That's when if you decrease it to bare minimum, Modo will just keep up with whatever you're doing, and then of course for the final you can increase it back. So it was a pleasure. Hope you enjoyed it. Modo is a great app, and have fun modoing. There is a lot more coming from the Foundry, so take care, have a good day.